Well, it's been a little bit since I've done an album review. It's been a week since I did a review, which was the new Cannibal Corpse album, A Skeletal Domain, which I really liked. It's one of the top 10 albums so far this year. But now we move on to a real different band, different style of heavy metal, traditional heavy metal or alternative metal, whichever you want to call this band, or hard rock. To me, I consider these guys to be a traditional metal band, Godsmack. For those out there who don't know who Godsmack is, I'll give you a brief history lesson. Godsmack started in the mid 1990s, off the heels and off of the end point of when grunge was coming to an end before Kurt Cobain committed suicide. Godsmack was a band that took their influences and waved them high up with a flag and flew the flag for some more traditional heavy metal to come throughout the 90s. They were influenced by many bands such as Aerosmith, Alice in Chains, Rush, Pantera, Metallica, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin. Influenced by a lot of bands along those lines. Although they get labeled as a post-grunge band because of the vocal style of Sully Erna, which I really don't hear the post-grunge musical aspects to their sound, which I have to say that them being called post-grunge is stupid. To me, they are a traditional heavy metal band because they have heavy songs, they got some great guitar styles, and Sully Erna's voice is a mixture of Lane Staley from Alice in Chains, may he rest in peace, and James Hetfield of Metallica. He mixes in those influences in his vocal range, and he's a hell of a baritone, low-voiced with some screamy, higher voice kind of range a little bit, kind of a vocal style that Sully possesses. So, they came out with their first album, their self-titled debut album in 1998, which is often regarded as one of the best modern debut albums from any band ever, and I couldn't agree more. In fact, I'd put that up there as one of my top 5 favorite debut albums of all time, because that album has classic songs such as Voodoo, Keep Away, Bad Religion, Whatever, bunch of songs, Moon Baby, and other great songs on there like Time Bomb that were great. That album just really showed to the mainstream world for their first record that Godsmack was going to be a band that's going to help fly the flag for traditional heavy metal and keep it up in the mainstream to make sure people know what heavy metal is and how it should be. They were a huge help in making heavy metal popular again after the grunge movement pretty much died off in the mid-90s. But then they came out with their second album, Awake, in 2000, in which their first album, it got kind of labeled as a new metal album, which they were never new metal. They just got lumped into that category because they came in around that time period of bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit, Deftones, Cold Chamber, Stuck Mojo, and some of those bands. With Godsmack, they just got lumped into that when it was clear that they never rapped, they didn't have any of those kind of new metal style grooves or gothic aspects to them. They were just a traditional heavy metal band that was influenced by a lot of metal bands and some blues rock, hard rock style stuff from the 70s, including bands I mentioned earlier. So with that album Awake, it definitely proved that they were not a new metal band, that they were straightforward heavy metal, with songs like Awake and Greed and other tracks like that. And then they came out with an even heavier album in Faceless, which was one of, if not the heaviest album Godsmack ever put out, because of songs like Straight Out of Line, I Stand Alone, Realign, Serenity, songs like that. After that, they released an acoustic album called The Other Side, which was something so unique for the band, where they had pretty much they did like acoustic versions of their own songs, but they made a new song called Running Blind, and it was a great acoustic track. Then in 2006 they put out their album 4, which definitely went into a much more blues blues metal sound, which some of the songs on the album had a blues rock influence, and they mixed that in. They pretty much mixed in the blues style stuff of Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, mix it in with the traditional heavy metal style of Metallica, and they put it together into a melting pot, and out came that album. And you had some great songs on there like Speak, The Enemy, Voodoo 2, Bleeding Me, other tracks like that. They took a little bit of a hiatus from making albums and came back in 2010 with the album Oracle, which I thought was a little bit of a disappointment to myself and maybe to some fans. But we're about to find out if their new album, 1000 Horsepower, was able to bring back some old fans. And you know what? I will be the first to tell you right now, this album has brought my faith back into Godsmack, because after Oracle came out, I just wasn't that into it. It wasn't really good to me. I mean, it wasn't terrible by any stretch of the means, but nothing compared to their first 4 albums. But with 1000 Horsepower, before I even get into detail, this album was really, really good. I really think that this was their best disc since Faceless. While 4 was really good, I thought this has been their best work since Faceless. And that was 11 years ago, so it's been a long time. So without further ado, you kicked off the album with the title track, 1000 Horsepower, which is a great starter track for an album like this. And it has that kind of spirit of the song Fuel by Metallica in terms of the song lyrics and what the song's about. It's about life in the fast lane, which is something so cool to me, because I'm a car guy, or not really like a car guy, but NASCAR guy, racing fan. I thought this was an appropriate song for, say, a NASCAR event or IndyCar or Formula One, really anything racing. This song is a perfect fit for it. The song FML, Fuck My Life, was a really good track that I really liked on this album, that had pretty much just saying pretty much like, I'm tired of having all this BS happen to me, fuck my life, bunch of bullshit. And pretty much near the end, it's like all about taking a stand against your issues and conquering them, from what I got from the lyrics of that song. You had 3 tracks on here that were good, but didn't really hit me really hard, which was the songs Something Different. I thought that was really the weakest track on the album for me. Generation Dead, or Generation Day, whichever they prefer to call it, it was the longest song on the album at 6 minutes, over 6 minutes, but shockingly enough, it wasn't the song of the album, the best song on the album for me. I just felt that it didn't really go many places on that track. It's like, to me, they kind of just wasn't sure of the direction of that track. But it wasn't a terrible track by any means. I would say it's the second weakest track, but it wasn't terrible. The 3 solid tracks that were good, they weren't like tracks I wouldn't go back to. I may go back to them and they could grow on me, but when I first heard it the first time, it just didn't really hit me very hard. And the same with the song I Don't Belong, but that song was definitely the stronger of the 3 weaker tracks. But every other track on this album was great songs, like What's Next, Locked and Loaded, Living in the Gray, Nothing Comes Easy, and then the finale track, which I thought was the best song on the album, Turning to Stone. The way it starts and the way it ends was great, and the whole song was just beautifully constructed. It was just an epic song for me. So overall, Sully Erna's voice hasn't lost anything. He still is able to sing and have style of a voice and do his kind of screamy, growly kind of stuff, but not to the point of a death metal guy. But you get the picture. The riffs, ladies and gentlemen, the riffs that their new guitarist, Tony Rombola, was able to make on this album. I really thought he did an excellent job with the riffs. He had some really solid riffing going on this album. The solos on here were good too, but the riffs was what made this album. Just the riffs were great. the structuring of some of the tracks and its style, in the style of a traditional heavy metal album, was very well done, if you ask me. The production on this album was really good. I really liked how everything sounded. The drums, the guitars, the bass, the vocals, all that. And even Sully Erna played rhythm guitar on the album, and he did a great job as well. I was really, really happy with how he was able to play the guitar on this album. And then the songs on here, some of them very, very heavy, which is to the point why I say this has been their heaviest album since FACELESS, and their best album since FACELESS. While 4 was a really good album, Oracle, it was okay, but 1,000 horsepower, really, really solid release. I would recommend it to anybody out there who likes Godsmack. I mean, I know my brother, once I get him into this album, he'll probably like it, because he's the person that got me into Godsmack, my brother. So he'd probably be very happy to hear about this album. So overall, really solid release, though I can't say it's album of the year, but it's a really good disc. I really, really like it. I would recommend it to anybody. 8.25 out of 10. It's a really, really solid release. I really, really liked it. And there you have it. So anyways, thank you guys for watching the Godsmack 1,000 horsepower album review. The next album that I want to try to review, that's a tough call, because some albums that are coming out, or some that I haven't checked out yet, like I maybe might review Iced Earth, or Massacre, or Sabaton, Vader, Hell Yeah, Anathema, Septic Flesh, or Goat Horror, Dragon Force. Those are the albums on my list that are albums that have already come out, but I haven't checked out yet. Everything else on my list are albums that have yet to be released, like the new Godflesh, the new Agonist, and probably the most anticipated album this year, and probably one of the most anticipated albums in a long time, the new At the Gates album, because this is the first time they've put out an album in 19 years since the classic Slaughter of the Soul. We'll find out if that album can maybe surpass Slaughter of the Soul, or it's just a great return to form kind of thing. The new Slipknot album I'm looking forward to checking out, because I like Slipknot. The new Obituary album should be great. The new Exodus, the new Sick of It All should be really good, and the new Cavalera Conspiracy. Those are the albums I'm probably going to plan on reviewing. But for the next one that I do hope to try to review at some point here in the next, I would say, few days, and that would be the new Dragon Force album, Maximum Overload. But anyways, guys, thank you for watching. I hope you guys have a great night. Rock on!